just for 2020. It's our final show, and we're really, looking forward to proceeding next year. And I strongly believe we'll be great here next year. So welcome again to the Golden Chair. Thank you for continuously supporting the work that we do. Thank you for continuously giving us the comments. We really appreciate them. We've got comments on who else to bring on the show. Tell us more, other people that you'd like to see on the show in 2021. We really, really appreciate, your support in 2020. I am, as you can see, in our studio tonight, we've got the Christmas tree. Indeed, Christmas is upon us. We're even thankful to Umachapelo for joining us in the show. She's added immense value at various, sometimes behind the scenes, you guys don't see it. She does a lot of research for us, but beyond research, she's amazing in terms of the content and the direction that the show is taking all the way from Bloemfontein. We really appreciate you, Kosazana. Good afternoon tonight.
Good evening, Mr. Kambule. Ngiyabonga for your kind words.
Well, let's get on to it. Tell us where you are watching us from. We'd like to hear from you. Where are you watching us from? Are you in Durban? Are you in Bloemfontein? Are you in Cape Town? Are you in Johannesburg? Are you in Soweto? Are you in Pietermaritzburg? Where exactly are you watching us from? Would like to hear from you. Namhlanje, it's a different show because it's a different. We're just having a conversation between myself and Matapelo, and we are live. We want to hear from you. Ask us questions. Give us the contributions on who would you like us to, to invite next year. We really, really want to hear from you. Welcome again to the Golden Chair. We shall continue to empower you even in 2020. It's not the final show. Remember, it's just the final show in 2020. Next year, sometime first quarter of the year, most likely in February, we shall resume this great conversations. But we want to hear who would you like us to invite in 2021. Tell us who you, Matapelo, let's get right onto it.
First of all, good evening and welcome to all our listeners. Thank you so much for your continued support. As Mr. Kambule has already said, we're very thankful and we'd like to hear from you on who you would like us to have next on the show. So just to give you a bit of context on the conversation that we're going to be talking about tonight. So this evening, what we have planned for you is to have a thorough discussion and dive deep into economic activity and what are some of the things that can be done to improve the state of the economy. So just to bring you into a bit of context, we went ahead extensively and looked at countries such as Malaysia, Rwanda, the UAE, Singapore, just to see their economic activity and what are the things that they're doing to make sure that the economy is growing at a larger level in comparison to obviously our endeavors that we've been doing as a country in South Africa. And we'll also be touching on what are some of the key things that would drive the economy of South Africa forward and what are some of the key factors that can help and contribute that you and I can do in everyday life so that we help break the cycle of unemployment, help eradicate poverty, help young people as well. And we'll also be discussing some of the key skills as a young person that you can have, or maybe you are in your mid-30s, mid-40s, you would need an upskill, and that's where Mr. Kambule will come in to suggest ways in which we can help grow the economy and some of the skills that he would like to believe are critical for the economy to go forward. So just to bring you a bit of context with some of the research that we've been conducting is to say, when we check what other countries have decided to use to grow the economy, when we look at a country such as the UAE, they took the minimal that they had because they were in oil, they were oil intensive and relied on oil as a natural resource, and they used all the revenue that they received from that oil to invest actually into the infrastructure and make it a tourist attraction for a lot of tourists, for them to come into Dubai, have fun, shop, use it as a tourist attraction, but also helping to build the economy. So I think with that, we can deduce that you use what you have to grow and scale, and also when it's governed correctly, then that's only when you can see the progress. So I think, Mr. Kambule, from your side, if you could touch a bit on what are some of the key factors that you think are driving the economies in different parts of the world.
Just to give you more statistics, thanks, Matapelo. Just to give you a little bit more statistics, in 1965, just to give you context, Singapore was off-spun. In other words, they were actually expelled from Malaysia. Okay, so in 1965, the GDP of Singapore, I'm looking at my notes now, it was $320 GDP per capita. It was $320. Okay. Now, the GDP per capita, it's a measure of checking the strength of the economy of a particular country. Now, just to give you the context, now the latest numbers as at the end of 2019, the GDP per capita is now $60,000. Okay, in 1965, when they left Malaysia, Singapore, it was $320. Now it's $60,000. So in other words, it shows how the work, the kind of work that they've done as a country. So we wanna start globally. What are other countries are doing? Those countries were obviously as disadvantaged as South Africa is now. They were developing at some point. And then just another country which is quite interesting, obviously, the growth. I'm just going to look at the growth of Rwanda. In 2003, the GDP per capita of Rwanda was $215. Now it's tripled to $762. Okay, now they've done something correct. In South Africa, obviously, our economy is much bigger and much stronger. The GDP per capita in 2011 was $8,000, and now, 8 years later, it's now $6,000. So there's something that is not correct, that we are doing incorrectly. Now, if you were to extrapolate these numbers in South Africa and look at Black people, the GDP per capita is much lower when you look at Black people only, just Black people only. And when you look at white people only, the number is much higher. So the 8,000 can be misleading. So we now want to focus more on what can be done to build our economy, with a very strong focus in South Africa on the township and rural economies. What exactly can we do to build our economies? Tell us, as we said earlier, where you are watching us from. We'd like to hear from you. We'd like to hear Obuti, where exactly are you watching us? Leave us comments. But we want to get onto a number of things that we can do. Matapelo, would you like to say something, or should I proceed?
I think you can proceed. Thank you.
Okay. Now, just to give you some very things that are practical, that are at your fingertips, literally in every township. As Matapelo was saying, most of these countries, maybe with the exception of EUAE, but most of the countries like Singapore, Rwanda, etc., and obviously a number of them in Asia, their major focus is on manufacturing, with Singapore focusing on electronics, predominantly electronics. Electronic manufacturing accounts for about 20% of its manufacturing, of its local economy. Now, the question is, let's forget about those countries. They sound like something that's far. They've got something different. They've got a different context, etc., etc. But what can we do in South Africa? That's what you want to know. What can we do to build our economy in South Africa? That's what I'd like to, in particular, our township economy, so that we can change the trajectory and build the local economy. Just to give you an example, if as a country we were to build a culture of manufacturing, okay? If we were as a country were to build a culture of manufacturing, if you go to any township, Tembisa, was in Tembisa a few weeks ago, go to Tembisa, you go to Soweto, you find that there are people selling gates in the streets. They are selling, they are selling gates in the streets. And those people that are selling gates in the streets, unfortunately, so they are foreigners. But you've got locals who are welders, but just never thought about manufacturing those gates. And yet we have a market of people that can manufacture the gates. Then there is a demand for those gates, because almost every house in a township has a gate. So the whole point, sorry man, someone is calling me and I keep on canceling the call. So the whole point of of the township economy, it's looking at what is the demand, what do the people in the area need, what services do they need, what products do they need. And you typically, every household needs a soap, every household will need furniture, every household will need every household will need liquid soap. They will need, soap to wash their faces. They will need, what else do they need, Matapelo? Every, they will need clothes. People will need clothes.
Yes, most certainly.
At the things that we can sell internally, but without a culture of manufacturing as a country, we are not going to turn this economy around. Now, that's the first one. But even on that one, I want to expand a little bit. Now, every household has electronics. Every household has cell phones. Every household has typically a tablet or something, et cetera, et cetera. So in the township, I'm talking about just in the township, they've got electronics, they've got TVs, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the question is, it's just the manufacturing of those as well as the maintenance of those. If you want to fix your cell phone, Matapelo, you have to go into town and get a Pakistan to do it for you. Why? Because the Pakistanis, they took a decision several years ago to make sure that they train millions and millions of young people. When they've trained those millions of young people, they go throughout the world, in Africa, in the United States, and everywhere, to make sure that they go and assist those countries to fix the cell phones. But the issue here, we need to build a culture of manufacturing. But now, what can government do? In my view, because we always say in the golden chair, we don't want to rely on government, but because the market is there. Your neighbor wants a liquid soap. You want a liquid soap. 20 other houses and thousands of other houses, they want it. So the question is, what can we do? We need to build a culture of manufacturing. Now, how do we build that culture? We build that culture by training people to become manufacturers. Now, at what point, at what level do we train them? Typically at a younger age, but even if it's not younger age, during their high school, you still have an opportunity to train a 25-year-old, a 30-year-old, a 23-year-old, a 40-year-old to manufacture something. Because you see, if you give someone, to give you an example, if you give someone an equipment to manufacture something without training, without entrepreneurship training, you are actually setting them up for failure. You can actually demoralize them if their business does not become successful. So you need to support them with entrepreneurial skills. You need to support them with, manufacturing capacity, skills, and then be able to give them, soft loans so that they are able to manufacture. So in my mind, it's not, I met someone recently, in fact, 2 days ago in Johannesburg. They are manufacturing sanitary pads, washable sanitary pads that can stay for like 5 to 10 years, that the young kids, the poor kids, especially in the rural areas, that can be able to use them on a consistent basis. So the whole point I'm trying to make is they have a small operation. If we were to convert every garage, every lonky garage, a car, into a manufacturing, into a factory, because that's what China has done. Every garage, instead of parking cars, they actually manufacturing every back room. They actually converted them into small factories. It doesn't have to be a big factory. In South Africa, for some reason, we've got a mindset of big things. We've got a mindset of a big factory. We've got a mindset of Kaiser Chiefs. That's why we support Kaiser Chiefs and Pirates only, because we want to always big things, big things. We can't support Amazulu, Golden Arrows, you know, Bloemfontein Celtics, because what if they don't win? We want to be winners. We want to be part of the big things, you know. So I think that's a problem that we need, you know, that we want big brands all the time. We want to shop in malls all the time. But if we were to, you know, to create that culture or manufacturing culture, I strongly believe we can turn around the economy, because you don't have to create people another Unilever, which is big. No. You can create, you know, a small company that will feed its family, a small company that will feed, you know, the family and the extended family. That's how China has done it. That's why China, you don't have it in China. It's not that they have big factories every corner. No. They've got factories in the rural areas, and people don't have to move from the rural areas into Beijing. They move to Beijing to sell because the market is bigger there. They move to Shanghai to sell, you know, Guangzhou, and all those places in order to sell. But we need to build a culture of manufacturing in South Africa. Matapelo?
I think I'm going to have to agree with you there, Mr. Kambule. I'd just like to hear if any of our viewers have a different perspective. But I do agree with you that entrepreneurship, knowledge, and skill should be something that we start with from as early as when you do projects already in grade 7, when they ask for career fairs on what do you want to become or who do you want to be. Already it should be in the system to be taught that you might want to be a manufacturer, because when you are the manufacturer, then all the wholesalers, then you become, you attract all distributors, instead of just being the person who waits for the finished product, which is exported from another country to you. So I would have to agree with you there to say, as soon as we can give education of manufacturing, and also an employer mind to say, as much as you might be an employer, start with it from a level of with production level, to say, this thing that I'm trying to sell, how can I produce it? How can I make sure that where I am, it is produced and I can give out the final product to the public for final consumption? So we need to ask ourselves those questions, and also attract attention to our state-owned enterprises to say, when we check the facts and we go to our state-owned enterprises who support SMMEs, you find that the biggest problem is that SMMEs don't have space. They don't have where they're working from when they're being given a chance to get equipment, for example, from organizations such as NYDA, who do give small, medium enterprises things like equipment for them to help them start the business. The main problem has always been they don't have space, and from that space, then they're unable to receive the equipment. So imagine if you were actually at a factory for you to receive the equipment, in which the space has been provided for you by the state, then it means that you would have the capacity to accept the equipment and for you to be able to give out the skill. Because at the end of the day, for you to eradicate the poverty around you, you need to empower the people who stay around you. So like Mr. Kambule is saying, to say a factory is not a big thing. Don't think of a factory as, oh my goodness, I'm sitting here, Nike produces all these shoes. It means that I need to have a factory that is 600-700 square meters big. Just think about where you are at the moment, and then fill in that place that you're at with the equipment that is needed to manufacture, and then supply the local economy in which you stay at with the tools that they need. Like he said, the cleaning supplies. Every house can't remain dirty. You know, when we have emerging cleaning supplies. I've seen a lot of emerging cleaning supplies from Black people, which makes me very proud to say people have acknowledged that liquid soap is not called Sunlight. Like you can literally make your own sunlight as a person. So it has been quite interesting to see the journey that Black people are now embarking on, to say we do acknowledge that it doesn't only have to be sunlight, and it doesn't only have to be handy Andy for it to be a cleaning detergent. So I think that is the route that we're stepping in the right direction as a country. However, we do need support from our government to say, as much as we do help with skills development and entrepreneurship skills, let's just make sure that we expand the skill into what can grow the economy at a larger scale. Because when because I think with countries such as China in them, the labor is not expensive, mainly because the transfer of skill is there, and because there is a competitive market within it. So if all of us are competing within a specific market, then it makes the labor quite cheaper. And once the labor is cheaper, then we'd be at a level of being able to grow the economy, because now the unemployment rate is going up and the competition around the area is also going up as well. So I think it's a very important contribution to make into the economy, to say, we as South Africa, what is the strongest point in minerals in terms of what we have, and also with the capacity that state-owned enterprises can help us with, how can we use that specific skill instead of just upskilling you and leaving you there? How can we upskill you in a way as an individual that can help you embark on a journey that won't allow you to need tools or need further assistance from when you have it, such as a manufacturing skill?
Thanks a lot, Matapelo. The second area and the final area, in my view, that's a very good input. Thank you. The second area and the final area, the Department of Higher Education, every single year, on NSFAS, they spend billions of rands accommodating the students. Okay. Now, I know someone is going to say, but yeah, we know there's a student accommodation sector, but government or the universities and the TVET colleges, they are only providing 3 year, 3 years in terms of what do you call this? Contracts, 3 year contracts. Now, I want to speak to that in detail. You see, there are 12 new TVET colleges that have been built throughout the country. I think 6 of them are in KwaZulu-Natal. You've got 2 in in Limpopo. You've got 2 in Eastern Cape. I can't remember the other 2. Where do they come from? You've got universities already in Limpopo that are in the townships. You've got, I don't know whether you've got any university in the township or technical.
Yes, we do. We have a college and a university in the township.
We've got a universities in a township. You know, just to give you an example, Matapelo, in Durban, we have a university called MUT, Mangosuthu University of Technology. It's MLAS. They have a number of thousand students that they are accommodating. But what is happening is they are busing students from MLAS, which is 20 minutes away, into town, unfortunately, this will sound racist, but into accommodation that is owned by other races other than Black African people. Okay? Now, the reality is we cannot compete. We cannot compete in town at Durban. Those places were bought several years ago by various other race groups before we even allowed to own, to own in town. Now, the reality is we cannot compete there, but we can compete in LAS. We can compete in Mbali, where there is DUT, but there's no accommodation. And NSFAS is spending money in town as in the city center of Pietermaritzburg. They have to bus people from a DUT, Mbali, all the way to town, and that money goes to other race groups. So NSFAS, which is a government entity, and universities, which are obviously by extension government, are spending billions of rands accommodating Black brothers and sisters, but in accommodation facilities that are not owned by Black people. Not because they want to, but by design and default, because Black people have not invested in their own townships. Now, what has to happen? Because it's not about saying it doesn't happen. The question is, what do we need to do? Now, if NSFAS, or not necessarily NSFAS, it's through either a TVET college or university. If a university gives you a 3-year contract, you come to me and say, Tlantla, I want to build a 200-bed facility in Bali, if half a kilometer away or 200 meters away or wherever from the university or MLAS. But I want to build a 200-bed facility, and we know the rates range from 1,800 rand per bed to 2,000 rands per bed. I'm not going to get into technical details in terms of the figures per month. Now, if we were to go to people who have a 500,000 rand here, another one has 500,000 rand, another one has 2 million rands, etc., and we pull those people and say, we want to build a 10 million rand facility. We want to build a 10 million rand facility. I'm just where we can put, in fact, for 6 million rands, we can get 250 learners. We want to build a 6 million rand facility, but we know that our contract is only going to be 3 years. Now, which means we cannot use the cash flows or the income that we are going to get from a university or from a TVET college to be able to fund, because remember, a bank will not give you more than the contract term that you have, will not borrow you, will not lend you more than. So what we need to do is to then reduce something. There's something called debt equity split. We reduce the debt and then get more people to play in the equity space. But if you don't have your own Maliwen, what do you do? What people who have the money, you then say, I have this opportunity. I want to build a 250-bed facility for students. You secure it. There is Wi-Fi. Let me tell you, I will invest in that. Someone else will invest. Will invest in it. Umkhize, Undlovu, Matapelo, and they will invest in that. They will pull, called crowdfunding. They will pull their funds and say, look, if we need 6 million rands, only borrow 3 million rands from a bank, or then the debt equity split is 50-50, or you borrow 40%, sorry, 60%, we'll give you 40%. Okay, I hope I'm clear. We'll give you 40%, which is going to be equity. Now, the question then, you make your money from that because the debt is so low. You are in a better position to be able, so that the debt is 60%, and the equity contribution from these people who have the money. Now, the question is, the whole thing is it's not that you don't have the money. You're not going to the bank with your head in the hand. You're saying, I've got 40% of own contribution in the form of those other people. Don't expect that you'll own 100% of that facility. You may own 20% of the facility because you are a dealer. You brought the deal, you put it together, etc., etc. And then after 3 years, you pray that the university or the TVET college extends your contract. If the TVET college extends your contract, then you now are able to use the second, you've paid your 60% debt, you now only owe the 40%, which is the equity contribution from the investors. You now go back to the university and say, look, I've run it successfully, please give me another 3 years. The truth is, the probability of the university not giving you the contract again is very low. You have a 250-bed facility that is here, a kilometer or half a kilometer away from the university or from a TVET college. They will give it to you again. Or you can then, Kashise, or Ness and Dotisha from the area. But the university and the TVET college is much safer. Now, what do you then do? You use the second term, which is another 3 years, to pay back your partners. Okay? You then pay back the 40%, and obviously they will want a return on their equity contribution. Then you use that second period to then pay back those partners. Now, after 6 years, you now have a facility, Matapele, as young as you are, that is freehold, but you initially relied on the people that have funded you. And those people, they contributed the 40%, and you went to the bank or a DFI to get that 40% debt contribution. The truth is, if you come to me and you come to anyone else who has the funding and the money of own, which is the own contribution, with such a transaction, I will give it to you. Someone else is going to give it to you. But people are, they always limited and say, but where do I fund the money? I went to the bank, they want a own contribution of 30% and 40%. The truth is, you don't have that own contribution. Because you don't have that own contribution, you then stop. Continue to put the deal together and then go and look for people. Now I'm saying, if we were to do that, and we have 10 of these, and the 300 million rands that EDUT gives Mbali, so that gives to the student that's Mbali, instead of that 300 million rands going to other races into town, you will now have these local people from Mbali, or even doesn't have to be local, but it can, the black people owning property. Now we are creating wealth. We are creating wealth. That wealth is going to be owned by black people. Now, the probability, even of after 6 years of you now going into other property spaces like in town and everywhere else is higher. Money is there. We just have to be smart. We just have to collaborate. We just have to take a long-term view. It's not immediate. It's a long-term view. Now, I am aware that NSFAS is spending billions and billions of rands. The unfortunate thing is that money is being spent on Indians and white people, and our black brothers and sisters are not benefiting. We've got 12 new TVET colleges, and in those 12 new TVET colleges, those people are going to move into the areas, into Ingonyama Trust areas, into the rural areas, into the townships. And if we don't do something now, we are going to lose out. We need to create wealth. Property as wealth. Property is long-term. You don't make wealth immediately. It takes time. It can be 6 years, it can be 9 years, but guess what? You will now ultimately own that building, Machapelo. It will be yours after 6 years or even after 9 years, but it requires patience and ungabi greedy and want to own everything. So I'm challenging you as a viewer out there at home. Go and I'm sure your answer is going to be, but there's no space. But there are 4 neighbors. You buy them, buy those 4 neighbors and tell them, I want to buy your houses that are closer to the university. Talk to them. It begins there. Buy those 4 neighbors and say, I want to buy you because I want to build student accommodation. And that's what you need to do. You don't have money. You sign sale agreements with them, and then you come to people, and then you do rezoning, planning approvals, etc., etc. Then you go to people who have the cash, who will give you the 40% contribution. I know we always say money is not there. I'm telling you today, money is there. But if you think you are going to have your own contribution of 40% of 6 million rands, you don't have 2.4 million rands. That is the unfortunate thing. But other people do. It doesn't have to be one person. It can be a lot of other people. But it means you will lose 80% of your equity, which is your shareholding, and then ultimately recoup it back after 6 years, and then you own 100% of your facility. It's a bit of structuring. I know it's late in the evening. It's the evening, but I strongly believe that if we can begin to think kanjalo, we are creating real wealth for Black people, and we can begin to play in the student accommodation sector, which we are not currently playing at. Matapelo, as we conclude.
I think that's a very interesting point that you're making there, Mr. Kambule, to say if organizations such as NSFAS spend so much money on transporting the learners from the campus facility to their accommodation and paying rent to other races on their accommodation, then you definitely be cutting out a lot of expenses if you were to build a facility closer to the university, because now you're cutting out the transport of getting into town. I think just to pick your brain a little bit, because this example that you're making is very, very particular, and I'm tempted to go for it as soon as the show ends. So I just want to find out, just for the listeners who out there from you with the example that you're making. You've acquired a lot of knowledge where property is concerned, because with the terms that you're using, because you've been a successful businessman for quite some time, these are terms that you're familiar with. So just to leave the listener with a few of some of the things that they can look into for them to be as well as knowledgeable as you are in fields such as economy or in fields such as economics or investment. What are some of the tools that you think can help them facilitate this process? Because me as Umatapela, I'd probably be thinking, oh, okay, let me approach Mr. Kambule with this idea, but my idea is not polished and it's easy for you to be able to just take over the transaction. So I'd just like to pick your brain a little bit where knowledge is concerned, to say, what are some of the tools or skills that you would encourage Black people to have where property is concerned, so that they're able to facilitate and maneuver their way into such a complex transaction like the one that you just mentioned now?
In fact, Matapelo, this one, I don't even think it's complex. Because if you stay MLAS, there's a university called MUT, Mangosuthu University of Technology. All you need to do is to go to a few neighbors that stay not very far from the university. Get an estate agent to go and approach them on your behalf. 4 or 5 or 6 of them. And say, don't tell them what you want to do. You just want to buy them. Sign a sale agreement, okay? You haven't spent a cent. You've just asked an agent to go and speak to those 6 neighbors. Obviously, you want to make sure that it's not very far from the university, okay? A kilometer or 2. If it's 5, it's still far better than going into town. It still doesn't matter, but the shorter the better, the distance, the closer the better. Now, so you haven't spent a cent. You don't need any skill to do that, except to approach, to be able to speak to an agent. Thereafter, you sign those sale agreements, subject to, obviously, the approval of the planning approvals by the municipality. You then say, okay, the municipality would like to, to rezone so that we get from one single dwelling, which is a single residential house, into multi-story, okay? And then there's something called floor area. You get, I don't want to get too technical, but then you improve the floor area, you improve the bulk. So you begin to have, in other words, instead of having one dwelling or 6 dwellings, you now can have one big dwelling, which will have 250 beds, okay? Can you still follow me? Okay.
Yes, I am.
So that rezoning, and you rezone it, and number 2, you relax. It's called relaxation of the planning restrictions. Okay, you relax the planning restrictions. Okay, now once you've done that, okay, that will cost you a bit of money. I'm just picking a number. It will cost you 200,000 rand. But again, if you don't have that money, okay, you then go to the municipality and check if the municipality will agree to it. And if the municipality says, look, we don't think it's a problem, we can give you approval for student accommodation, you just tell them the bulk, you have an architect who will come at risk, etc., and then you get a town planner who will probably be able to come at risk, and then you say, Klantla, I'm happy. I just need the initial seed capital or funding, like 200,000 rands, to get all the approvals in place. That process may take you 6 months to a year. Okay, doesn't matter. You are patient, remember, but you haven't spent a lot of money up front. Okay, now, so you then say the next step. Now you've got planning approval, then you can begin to approach the bigger investors. Once you approach those bigger investors, you now have all the planning approvals. You need 250 beds, and you're going to spend 6 million rands. You need the engineers to get your, obviously, the roads, etc., plumbing, stormwater drainage, etc., whatever is required to make sure that the building is up to the correct standard that the university is looking for. So there is no money that is required. Money, we've always limited ourselves in our minds and say, sitingi money. No. There is a time where we don't need money. But the passion, the will, the zeal is what is important. Are you willing to pursue it? Have you got the zeal? Have you got the drive to do it? And it begins with you going to an estate agent and asking him or her to approach those neighbors. And if you pull it off, you should get those 6 neighbors or 4 neighbors so that you can have a good structure. I can tell you now, you have a winner. You can then
Wow.
8 years or 9 years of student accommodation.
That is actually so impressive, because at the end of the day, you're touching on a point that people often say is a problem. Like would be normally sitting in conversations and you hear a person not saying they're unable to start a business because batting in Mali and they need this. So I think the most important part that you've touched on is the fact that we need information. And I do hope that this was helpful to any one of the listeners who are here. Maybe you're stuck, maybe you're thinking, how do I even take a first step from here? Now you've literally gotten step A to Z, because I'd like to believe that Mr. Kambule covered every single stone there is to be unturned. And also he covered a very important aspect, which is determination. And I think that's very important, Mr. Kambule, to say, if you have the willingness to do something, then it means that you will stop at nothing. When you hear that you now need 200,000 for the architect and the town planner to be able to come and visit the facility, all of a sudden you need to think out of the box to say, how will I be able to get this money, which I don't have, but I know people who do? Then you start thinking about people like Mr. Kambule in mind to say, if I approach him and I tell him that this is what I want to do, because you have done the bulk of the groundwork. Because the other issue that we normally face as people go by, or young people at large, is to say, they're not sitting with any information at all, but are expecting to get help. It's almost like you're not showing me what you yourself have done so that I can be able to help you. So it's very easy for Mr. Kambule to say, no, I see what you want, I see your vision, because I see it on paper, you've written everything out, you've gotten the approvals, and all you need is the seed capital, which is 200,000. And I don't see a reason in which investors would not want to collaborate or have a crowdfunding in such a deal as that, because first things first, the paperwork is there. This is not a person who's a chancer. This is a person who has a long-term vision, and you have clearly stipulated how the money will be, how the investor will get a return on what they've been, on what they're offering. Because at the end of the day, if I come show you a transaction in which I'd like to engage in, you would like to know as an investor what that transaction specifically is in it for you. So if you have such information and you attract and attend to investors such as Mr. Kambule and the likes, and the people who would have that sort of money, then I don't see a reason why you would not be able to crowdfund for a project such as this.
Absolutely. Thanks, Matapelo. I'm saying, as a final word from me, there are 50 TVET colleges in this country, which were previously called FETs. There are 50 of them everywhere. Okay, let's approach them. There are several universities. There are 12 universities, but each university has got a number of campuses. Probably, if you look at the number of campuses that they have, there's probably like 40 or 50. Let's look at those. But again, if you want to compete in town, like everyone, if you want to compete in Braamfontein, it's going to be more difficult. If you want to compete in Point at Durban, it's going to be very difficult. If you want to compete in East London, it's going to be difficult. I'm not saying don't compete there. You can go and compete in those spaces. But we've got our own townships. We've got our own rural areas where they are still scared to invest there. But today we are not. We're building our beautiful homes. So we are investing just by building our parents' homes and the beautiful homes where we stay as well. That's a sign of investment. Okay, so we're not scared to invest. People are investing millions and millions in the rural areas, which is great. We love that. But now I'm saying there's an opportunity for you to not only invest in your primary residence, but also invest in manufacturing, in student accommodation, where we're closer to where the TVET colleges and the universities are. That's food for thought for this Christmas. That's a final word from me. I know I'm going to get a lot of inboxes, subsequent to this. People asking questions. I don't mind asking questions, but I want people who have done their groundwork. Please don't ask me what I've already covered here. Do your groundwork, get as further as possible, get as much information as possible. Go to your TVET colleges. Don't ask me where do you go from here. Go to your TVET college, go to the nearest university, ask the rates, start doing some modeling. Look for the accountants in the area, If you have to pay 2,000 rands or 2,000 rands to get that work done, please don't ask me to. So how do I structure it? Please, no. Come to me when you've got something tangible. Even through our relationships with the equity investors who want to become mentors, I'm prepared to speak to them and say, let's look for project finance. The guys will come. They will come to the party. They've got the money. So instead of you running around and looking for funders, we've got the funders through the golden check, where we say, do all the groundwork. Don't come to us when you're still wanting 200,000, or just do all the groundwork. When you've done all the groundwork, when you've got the approvals, we will come and become your equity investors. And using our balance sheet and other people who will invest, you'll be in a better position to raise the capital. But guess what? It's not for free. Instead of owning 100%, I'll accept that you'll probably own 10 or 20% whilst the equity investors are there. But once they are out, if you buy them over during the second term, you have a better chance of owning your own building. Guess what? At that stage, you have a state-of-the-art 250 bed that you own. You can convert it into a B&B, into a hotel, into anything that you like. If the university doesn't give you the third term, for whatever reason, if the university or the TVET college was to move, you have a state-of-the-art building, which you can actually sell or do something with it. And that's the final word from me. As you give them the final word, Matapelo. See you next year.
Thank you, Mr. Kambule, and to all our listeners, thank you so much once again. I hope that you have taken something from this conversation. We were covering on how to actively participate in the economy and what steps you can take as an individual to be able to create wealth for yourself. We firstly touched on how important it is for South Africa to start investing in manufacturing as a primary business, to say don't look for being an employer who's going to sell a product that has been exported from China. Think about what China uses as raw materials and how you can produce it at your own home for you to become the factory that actually manufactures the specific product, and also wealth creation on how you can use TVET colleges and universities that are around you for you to be able to create your own wealth. Start investing in things such as your knowledge in the area and how can you actively decide, or how can you actively contribute and turn the facilities that are near the area into student accommodation. So I think if this information is available for free, there's no way we don't have a lot of rich Black people. Please make use of this information, actively participate in engagements that are going to help uplift you, create wealth for you and future generations. And from myself, it has been such an honor being on this show. I hope that we will be seeing you next year. As Mr. Kambule has already said, we'll be seeing you in February with all the exciting guests that you've been suggesting for us. And from myself, have a Merry Christmas and may God all bless you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.